Alrighty, hello friends, and happy Monday to everyone. Happy post-draft weekend Monday. I hope everyone had a great weekend. I know I did, even though maybe the draft didn't go exactly as I'd hoped. The kids and I had a really fun weekend together. Actually, their mom was out of town all of last week, and so they were with me all week, whereas, we usually sort of split time, but, I've had them since last weekend, so I've had them for just 8, 9, I don't know, however many days that is, just to myself, and that's always nice. And this weekend, what did we do? We had, our little draft party, obviously. I hope you guys tuned into that. We had that on Thursday for round 1, and then we did some more draft stuff on Friday night and watched some basketball. Then Saturday, Jack had soccer, which is always fun. We played at the playground for a little while after that. What else did we do Saturday? I think we just kind of played around the house and jumped on the trampoline and played football a little bit. But then the following day, which was Sunday, yesterday, we got up early for a Sunday, but late for us, and went to the zoo, and that was a ton of fun. And it was the Chattanooga Zoo, so it wasn't like anything super cool. They didn't have a lot of great predators and stuff, but there were a lot of cool animals, a lot of fun. The kids enjoyed it. And then we had a really good lunch on the way back, and the kids were very good at the restaurant, and it was just overall a very good weekend. And now, off of that, and on to what really matters, and that's football. We got a lot to talk about, obviously, today. I don't even know if I'll be able to fit it in, but I'm going to try to talk fast today. I'm not going to make the mistake or make any sort of false promises that this is going to be a short episode, because it is not. But it's not going to be any longer than usual, so there's that, too. But yeah, definitely a lot to dive into. We'll get first out of the way, basketball stuff. Do we need any more evidence that Kevin Durant cannot lead a team to a championship by now? He cannot be the guy on a championship team. Now, you could say he was the best player on those Warriors teams for those couple years he was there. I don't even think that's, a certainty. That would definitely be debatable, but there's no debate that it was still Steph Curry's team, and it was the entire time. It was before, it was then, and it was after. It was Curry's team. Curry was the guy. Now, Durant probably was the best player, but, he was not the leader. He was not it was never his team. He joined in after they had already won a championship 2 years ago, and then broke the record for regular season wins the following year. And that same year knocked his team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, out of the playoffs in a disastrous, embarrassing way. They were down. The Thunder had them down 3-1, and the Warriors came back and beat them in that series. I think that was either the first or second time that had ever happened at that point. And then he goes and joins up with them the following year. And they were already, a championship squad, the best team in basketball probably. And then he goes and he joins them. And then that's how he wins his championships. But that move honestly made me hate Kevin Durant for a long time, because I said it all along. That was the pussiest move maybe in the history of off-season sports things. I mean, to go and join up with the team that's already won a championship and broken records, and that just embarrassed your team in the postseason, and then a month later you go and join them. Anyway, so I did for a while really, really dislike Kevin Durant because of that. But since then, I've kind of gotten over it. Lots happened since then. And I've kind of been rooting for him to sort of be able to go and do his own thing somewhere, and, lead a team to success, lead a team maybe even to a championship, but he just can't do it. And now, he's in a little bit of a decline. He's maybe lost a tiny step, not quite as elite, as unstoppable as he used to be. But that team, there is absolutely no reason that they should have gotten swept. I mean, you've got Devin Booker. That team is stacked. And, yeah, I don't know what happened. I didn't even watch the game last night. But I don't think Durant will be back next year. I think he's going to realize this isn't working, and I'm going to have to go chase another ring somewhere else, join up with somebody, maybe go join LeBron in the Lakers if he's still going to be there. That would be interesting. But if he wants another championship, he's going to have to go and join a team that's already like one of the top 5 teams in the NBA to do it, because that's the only way he can do it. So, and then the Lakers, they got what feels like at this point a moral victory over the weekend, and didn't get swept at least. I don't know if they're going to take it any further than this. I hope that they will. But man, I am no longer discounting the Timberwolves. I'll tell you that. Going back to the other series, and the Mavericks. I've really been rooting for. I've always liked Kyrie. Maybe not so much as a person, but as a player, he's always been one of my favorite players to watch. And then in the East, who cares really? I mean, I thought that the biggest challenger to Boston was going to be Milwaukee. Now Lillard's hurt, Giannis is hurt. I'm pretty sure they lost. They're down now 3-1 to Indiana. They're probably not going to make it out of the first round. I do not see... Sorry, just bear with me for just one moment. I am trying to talk, and I'm stopped at the gas station at the same time, so I'm trying to put in all this information at the gas pump so I can get my gas. And anyway, but yeah, Milwaukee's obviously out of the question. I do not see New York as a legitimate threat. I really thought Philly was going to be the closest thing to a threat outside of Milwaukee to the Celtics, but doesn't even look like they're going to make it out of the first round. And they are a mess right now. There's a lot of people starting to say that maybe it's time for them to move on from Embiid. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. That's a whole other topic. And listen, I just wanted to go ahead and get all the basketball stuff out of the way early so we can talk about what really matters. So there are my basketball thoughts for now. Excuse me, maybe I'll do another show tomorrow and focus a little bit more on basketball. But for now, we have a ton to talk about. I've got my list of teams that I really like what they did in the draft. We're going to talk about the thing that's leading and dominating every show since Thursday, and that's what the Falcons did in the first round. We're going to talk about some stuff with the Vols. Joe Milton got an interesting draft situation for him, and something really cool with a current volunteer as well. So all that and more on Talking Sports at Work today. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back. All right. Hey, friends, back again. So, I've got a whole list of stuff to talk about today, and what I did was I went through every team's draft haul, and because I watched the majority of it, but there, especially in the late rounds, you kind of, doing other stuff. It's a Saturday. I'm not totally paying as much attention, but I did pretty much keep up with all the picks, and I made lists of the teams that I loved what they were doing. And I even then went back through and took some screenshots of their draft, so I would be able to, go over it in detail, because I'm not going to be able to look at things too much, while I'm driving. So I wanted to make sure I had it all in my brain. But first of all, the Titans. I got to be honest, this is disappointing. This is a disappointing draft for us. At first, but I'm not going to say it's disastrous for a couple of reasons. One is, at first, I felt like that was a horrible pick, taking J.C. Latham in the first round. I felt like the best things to do would be to either trade back or take Fashanu, or maybe even you could do both if you trade back with Minnesota. That would have been the best option. Maybe they weren't really calling. I don't know. But maybe we just liked J.C. Latham all along. I don't know. But it felt like, every mock draft had us taking Joe Alt, but most of those also had the Vikings trading up ahead of us. And so another quarterback would have been off the board, and the Chargers were, the ones who most people had them trading up with, including me in my mock draft. So at first I thought, why? Why do you spend the 7th overall pick on? He is the best right tackle in the draft, don't get me wrong, but that's not what we really need. We need somebody protecting Will Levis's blind side. I mean, I really don't even know who's on the roster right now who would be that guy. Is it Radens? Is it Nick Petit-Frere? I don't know. But then shortly after I started doing some digging and trying to find stuff, I started asking questions on social media, and I found the interview with J.C. Latham afterwards. And apparently, it is the plan to move him to left tackle. That's been the plan all along. He had discussed it with Bill Callahan, who is accepted as probably the best offensive line coach in the game, one of the best ever in the game, and is now going to be our offensive line coach. So he had discussed that move with Latham before the draft. So that is the plan. Latham is going to be our left tackle, and if he can make that switch, then he can be great. And then I like the pick. I honestly, I really did not like it, like I said at first, but then after finding out that they do plan on moving him to the left side and that it is Bill Callahan who's had a hand in all this and who's planned on doing this, I'm good with it. I do believe J.C. Latham, like I said, was the best right tackle in the draft, and many people had him. You look at a lot of outlets, NFL.com and some other major outlets, they had him actually rated higher than Joe Alt. Something just beeped at me. I don't know what that's about. Um, but that was at right tackle, not left tackle. So they had him they had Joe Alt rated as the highest left tackle and Latham as the highest rated right tackle. But if he can make that switch, the thing is, it's just for me and my, you see it happening where guys play left tackle in college and then switch to the right side, but you rarely see it the other way around. And that's because most college teams are going to start their best player, their best offensive lineman, their best tackle, their best pass blocker on the left side as it is. I don't know who's Alabama's left tackle right now, but I mean, is he better than Latham? Was he a better choice? Nick Saban's a pretty good coach. He knows what he's doing. So if he put Latham at right tackle, that is just a little concerning to me. I mean, we know he's a mauler. We know he is a people mover, but we need pass blocking. So I don't know. But again, if Callahan is, Bill Callahan the elder, if he is confident about this, which he clearly is, then I'm good with it. I'm still a little, not as happy as I would have been if we'd come away with Alt or Fashanu. But, I had said, if it comes down to it, Joe Alt is off the board. We're probably going to take Malik Neighbors. If it comes and Alt and Neighbors are both off the board, then I think we either need to take Fashanu or trade back. And hopefully we can trade back and still get Fashanu. But we end up taking Latham. And if he can play left tackle, I mean, his pro comp is Trent Williams. You can't, I mean, you got to love that, right? So if that's the case, I mean, I'm not saying by any stretch that he's going to end up being that good, but that's just, that's his comp. That's who people remind him of. Or whatever. That would be his ceiling to be Trent Williams. So you got to love that. He is huge. He is athletic. He is dominant in the run game and was good in the pass game on the right side. And in truth, in the modern NFL, it's not quite as big of a difference as it used to be. There's not so much a strong side and a weak side anymore. Teams are playing, it's more symmetrical. Defenses will put their best defensive end or best edge rusher on one day. They don't just play one side or the other. They'll usually put their best edge rusher, sort of move him around or put him where they see the weakest spot on the offensive line. So it's not as big of a thing, but it is for that offensive lineman. It is going to be a big switch. The footwork's different. Yeah, everything's going to be reversed. It's going to take some work for him to switch to the left side. But if he can do it, if he can do it well, then I'm going to end up loving this pick. It's just, that's, an if. That I'm not even going to say it's a big if, because again, if Bill Callahan thinks he can, then I'm good with it. What do I know compared to him? But it is a factor. It is an if to it. There's a word I'm trying to think of and I can't. I don't know. Whatever. There's the little bit of uncertainty. But if that works out, which it feels like it probably will, then I'm good with this pick. You move on then to the second round. Now this is another one that it felt like everybody's kind of torn on. It felt like we way overdrafted him, that he was probably still going to be available in the late second, maybe third round. And given that he had just been in some trouble for possibly DUI, um, a few weeks ago, couple weeks ago, it felt like he could have fallen even further than that. And then we take him at the beginning of the second round. It was a surprise. Now, I like him as a player, and it will fill a need for us. But he's not a guy that's going to play three downs. He's going to be your first and second down, space taker, people mover, and, run stopper. That's what he's going to be. Now, they've talked about it, and that he has said himself that he's talked with the coaching staff, and Callahan and the defensive coaches want him to get down to about 340. And if he can get down to 340, then he thinks he can be a Hall of Famer, which of course he's going to think that. But, if he loses some weight and gets down to where he can be out there on third down as well, then that will end up being a great pick. But for now, it feels like maybe a little bit of a reach, or quite a bit of a reach, especially, looking at the players who were available. There were still lots of really good receivers on the board at that point. There were still Adonai Mitchell was the one I was really hoping for there in the second round. He ends up falling a lot further than anyone expected. Edger and Cooper was another guy, or even Peyton Wilson, although people would have seen that as a reach. I really liked both of them, but we did end up addressing that position a little later. But, T'Vondre Sweat is a good player. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. He is a massive, just monster of a human being. He will require double teams every time he is out there, and that's going to be very, very helpful for Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry. I mean, there are only so many guys to block, and if you've got one guy requiring a double team here, you've got Jeffrey Simmons who's going to require a double team here. That's going to free us up to rush the passer a lot better. So that is going to help. But again, that's if he can be out there on third down as well. Now, teams pass on first down, second down. It's not like it used to be anyway, obviously. But, that it is going to really be a nice addition to the front, having him up there with Jeffrey Simmons. Those two together, that's going to be fearsome. And it's going to be really hard to run on us. So that's a great thing. Then you go to, but again, it just felt like there were better options available. And as people have said, as a lot of people have said on social media, we could have traded back and still gotten him. Now, what I responded to one person who said that was, it does take two to tango, and maybe the offers just weren't there where we still felt confident we could get him. But then that person pointed out to me that, well, hell, everybody was trading there early in the second round. It was like every, 2 of 3 picks were getting traded there in the second round. So there had to have been opportunities, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the calls, again, maybe we really loved him and we weren't confident that we could still get him if we traded back. I don't know. Maybe we had the feeling that other people liked him as well. Moving on, though, he's a good player. Just maybe could have gotten him a little later. But you got to remember, too, we didn't have a third-round pick this year. So if there was somebody we really loved, which maybe it was him, we just need to go ahead and grab him. Then in the fourth round, we got who is maybe my second favorite or favorite of these picks, and that was Cedric Gray from North Carolina, who was, I think, the third or fourth rated off-ball linebacker in the draft. To get that guy there in the fourth round, I feel like was a really great pick. He is a modern 3-down linebacker. He's going to be our guy in the middle. You think he can hopefully be our one of those team captain types, play caller from the middle linebacker spot, and he can be out there all 3 downs. Apparently he's not, great at, when teams get up to the second level, he's not great at getting off blocks, but that's apparently the only weakness in his game. And then you could think that's something that he can get better at. But if he's kept clean by T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, then this guy can be a tackling machine. He's also got great speed. He's good in coverage. So I really, really liked that pick. And so either that one or the Latham pick, after finding out he's going to move to the left side, those are my 2 favorite picks. Then after that, it just felt like we didn't really do anything that was too exciting. End up with Brownlee, which I don't know anything about him. He's a cornerback out of Louisville. Never seen him play. We'll see. It seemed like a popular pick, though, from what I was hearing and reading. Seemed like people like that pick. Jaquan Jackson, we did get a receiver out of Tulane. Again, I don't watch Tulane. I don't know. Hopefully. Safety from Miami, which that was an interesting pick, but it's, in the 7th round. And we finally get an edge rusher, but it's not until late, the 7th round. And you don't even know if that's a guy who, hopefully he's going to make the team and can contribute. But he's coming from that Michigan defense. So he's going to be well coached. He's going to be a decent player. But it's Jalen Harrell is the edge rusher we got. So, honestly, that feels like a missed opportunity. There were also some good edge rushers there available with our 2nd-round pick that we didn't take. Yeah, I think Chris Braswell was still there. Adonai Mitchell was still there. It felt like we could have done better there in the 2nd round. But in the end, this is what we got. I guess Rashad Weaver is going to be our the guy on the other side of Harold Landry. Honestly, I don't know. Did we sign anybody in free agency? Well, Sebastian Joseph Day is also going to be. He's a good player, and he's got some position versatility. He's listed as a defensive tackle, but I think he's kind of a similar. Not he's bigger than him, but he's similar to kind of what Danico Autry was for us. I think he can be that kind of guy. So, yeah, I'm excited about our defense. I'm excited about the improvements to the offensive line. I'm excited about Will Levis and Calvin Ridley and this two-headed speed monster at running back. And now if you look at the offensive line, it's going to be Latham on the left side, Peter Skoronski next to him. That could end up making one of the best left sides in the game. Lloyd Cushenberry's a significant upgrade at center. Right guard, I'm still not sure who will be there. That's going to probably be one that could, we'll see. And right tackle, I assume, is going to be Nick Petit-Frere. Hopefully he can get his shit back on track. And that's a much, 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 much better offensive line than what we fielded these last couple of years. And that was the priority going into this offseason, was improve the offensive line. And I think we did it in a big way. I really like what we did. Again, I hated the Latham pick at first, but then after finding out he is going to make the switch and that it's Bill Callahan who believes he can do it, okay, I'm good with it. That's a definite upgrade. At left tackle, Skoronski at left guard, Cushenberry at center, and then I'm still not sure about the right side, but, hopefully Petit-Frere was decent his rookie year. He was a decent starter. Then he had all kinds of problems with the suspension and the injury his sophomore season. But getting back, I think an offensive-minded head coach and Bill Callahan, again, the best offensive line coach in the game, can get him back on track. So very excited about the offensive line, excited about the new weapons, and excited about the defense. We made some upgrades there with all those guys I mentioned. So I think this is going to be a better team, but this is a division that's going to be tough. Every team in this division is getting better. And it could be very soon, maybe even as soon as next year, the AFC South might be the toughest division in football. And if not next year, then it might be by the following year. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on the Titans draft. I'm going to take a quick break and we'll go over everybody else that I like. All right, howdy friends, back again. So one thing I was just thinking of is I wonder if I was not a Titans fan, if I would have put us on this list of teams that I liked their draft. And truthfully, I don't think I would have. It would have been like a fringe pick, maybe like an honorable mention, because Latham and Sweat and Gray, those first 3 picks, which those are the ones you really hope to hit on. Those are the ones. And that's another thing I forgot to mention. I think Rand Carthon deserves a little bit of benefit of the doubt, just a little bit, because he hit it out of the park with the first 3 picks last year, getting Skoronski, Levis, and Tajay Spears. So I think he deserves a little bit of leeway and, a little bit of belief that he can do it again. And our priorities were obvious with those first 3 picks, especially the first 2. We want to get bigger. We want to get stronger. And a lot of people thought that it was going to be different. Now with Bill Callahan coming in, we're going to be a pass-happy team. We're going to be more of a finesse team. That is not the direction we're heading, apparently. I mean, we are going to be a more modern passing team, obviously, but we are prioritizing winning in the trenches, clearly, and that's awesome. We got some big old dudes. I mean, between those first two picks, we got, over 700 pounds worth of dude. So, yeah, very exciting there. Now, moving into the teams who are not Titans that I liked, number one on my list was the Vikings. I absolutely love what they did, especially in the first round. I think they won the first round. They got everybody in the world had them trading up into the top five to snag a quarterback, and it was pretty much everybody had it as J.J. McCarthy. And so you knew that was going to require them giving up the 11th pick as well as their other first round pick, which was 23, and probably even more on top of that. Well, yeah, more on top of that. But what did they do? They were patient. They waited. They, had to have their fingers crossed, I guess. I'm sure they did their homework as well as what other teams were looking at. And they stayed put. Now, they did end up moving up one spot with the Jets, but that didn't cost them much. And I'm sure that was just to keep Denver or the Raiders or anybody else from jumping into that spot. All right, we're about to have some technical difficulties. I don't know why this van. All right, hey friends, sorry about the interruption there. I really need to get a new app to record this stuff on, but that's a problem for another day. But yeah, I loved what the Vikings did. They were patient. They stayed where they were. They did not have to give up much at all. I mean, I don't even know what they gave up in that pick with the Jets, or that trade with the Jets. It may have been a third or fourth. I don't know. But to move up one spot did not cost them much of anything, and they got their quarterback. Excuse me. Now, I am not a huge believer in J.J. McCarthy, but if Kevin O'Connell is, then I'm going to trust that because I really like Kevin O'Connell. And we know that McCarthy has everything you could want. He just didn't show that much in college. He wasn't asked to show that much as a passer in college. And so, he could end up being the best quarterback in this draft. Who knows? But he certainly looks like, excuse me, a capable starter. And I think with a capable starter at the quarterback position who is mobile, which is something they have not had in the last several years, Kevin O'Connell as the coach, those ridiculous weapons at receiver and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, a really good offensive line, and I think sort of an underrated defense that is now improved. I think the Vikings could be really good. But they got him there at 10, and then I think they were already kind of had the plan in their mind that it's likely going to cost us. There's a very good chance that we're going to have to spend both of these first round picks to get our quarterback. And then when it didn't happen that way, they were like, well, hell, we've acquired all this draft capital largely because we were expecting to have to trade, and then we didn't really have to. So they went ahead and just traded up a few more spots and grabbed maybe the best defensive player in the draft, and that's Dallas Turner. Now, your opinions on that may vary, and I've said all along that it's close. I don't think there's much separating Turner, Latu, and Verse. Any of those three, all of those three, could end up being great, could end up being the best edge rusher in the draft. But to get a guy that he is, I believe he is, it feels like the consensus is, he was the best edge rusher in the draft. He's the most versatile defensive end or edge rusher linebacker in the draft. To get your star quarterback and maybe the best defensive player in the game, or in the draft, come on. That's incredible. And they didn't even have to give up much to do it. Look at what the Texans did last year. They got their franchise quarterback at 2, and then they had to give up a ton to move back up to 3 with the Cardinals to take Will Anderson. The Vikings may have just done the same thing without having to give up much at all. So it was an incredible first round. I don't think it could have gone any better for the. Okay, this is the 6th time I am trying this. Do not use the Spotify for Podcasters app. Do not use it. It's terrible. I'm only still using it because it's what I started on, and it was just I probably Googled starting a podcast and found that, That's the only reason I'm still using this, but I'm going to find another one because this is bullshit. Anyway, for the 6th or 7th time, I don't even know now, I'm going to say it and hope that it doesn't freeze up on me again. What was I saying? I love what the Vikings did in the first round. I don't even know what they did beyond that, but in the first round, they knocked it absolutely out of the park and they won the first round. I feel like I need to talk fast now before this thing screws up again. Who did? Okay, I am back again. And I just want to reiterate, do not use the Spotify for Podcasters app. I pulled over now. I've turned off the vehicle. I've taken my AirPods in and out. I've turned off the app. I've done everything I can think of. Let's cross our fingers and pray that I can get a few minutes done before this thing screws up again. Anyway, sorry, I'm trying to get back on the road now. The Vikings knocked the first round out of the park. Then the Bears, I think, were number 2 in terms of knocking the first round out of the park. And the reason I'm saying, even though they maybe were, the picks they took would have been rated higher, excuse me, the reason I have them rated number 2 over or below the Vikings, because the Vikings didn't have a top 10 pick. And they ended up with possibly a franchise quarterback and possibly the best defensive player on the board. The Bears did a great job, but they had number 1 overall and number 9. So they were expected to do great. Now, I've said I'm not a huge fan of Rome Odunze. I do think he's a tiny bit overrated, but if he pans out, then they have done great, and this will be the definitive draft for this franchise. The franchise that has not really had a franchise quarterback in my lifetime. The closest they've had that I can remember was Jay Cutler, and obviously they didn't even draft him. But yeah, this has just been a team that, it feels like they're almost cursed, but they have the closest thing to a can't-miss quarterback now that you can get without it being, a generational prospect. I think Caleb Williams is going to be a star. I hope that, and I think that he can help Rome Odunze to reach his potential and maybe develop into the player that people think he can be. So hopefully that works out. But they got their star quarterback, and they got him a number 1 weapon, a number 1 type receiver to spend his career with. This could be the pairing for the Bears for the next decade. So you got to be excited about that if you're a Bears fan. Here we go. I don't know. I seriously, this will now be at least the 20th try. I've stopped and had breakfast. I've turned the vehicle off. I've turned the phone off. I've completely disconnected and forgotten the Bluetooth for the van. I've reconnected the AirPods. I've done everything I could possibly think of. Let's see if this works. It seems like the issue was something to do with the Bluetooth with the van kept going in and out. So I've now completely turned that off and forgotten the van Bluetooth. So let's see now. I don't even remember at all where I was when we were talking. Where was I? Oh, we were talking about the Bears, right? So, yeah, I like what the Bears did in the first round. Beyond that, I'm not too sure. They took a punter in the 4th round, which I get it. He was the best player on that Iowa team, but that's way, 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 way too high to take a punter for anybody, especially a team that has other needs and not a lot of picks. So, but I love what they did in the first round. Next on my list, and this is not necessarily in order, but next is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Honestly, I think they were another team that just played the first round outstandingly, if that's even a word. I think they did a tremendous job of trading back, doing what I think a lot of people think the Titans should have done, both in the first round and the second round. It's what the Jaguars actually did. They traded back, acquired more picks. I think they got a 4th round pick out of it to move back just a little bit, and still got the guy who they wanted all along, most likely, and Brian Thomas Jr., a guy who has the potential to be a. Oh, okay, sorry, I thought it just stopped again. A guy who has the potential to be a star receiver in the league. Now he's not nearly as polished. He's not going to come in and replace Calvin Ridley because he's not nearly the route runner and not nearly as polished as Ridley. And he's not quite as polished as maybe his teammate Malik Neighbors, but he is every bit the athlete that Neighbors was. Maybe not have that explosiveness, but he's got some of the best top end speed in the draft, and he's big. He's got everything, all the traits you can want, and that's what you draft for, and you teach him the rest. And let's remember that this reminds me of a few years ago, when LSU had some great receivers and everybody looked at Jamar Chase as being the future NFL superstar, early first round pick, which he ended up being. But they looked at Justin Jefferson as kind of being the other guy. Chase is really the star. He's the going to be the big time player. Justin Jefferson's a good player and could end up being decent in the league. And then we see Justin Jefferson's now the best receiver in football, and Jamar Chase is really good as well. But it could be a similar thing here. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's hard to not think of that when you think of these two. But they got him in the first round. They got a good defensive tackle out of LSU, which just now occurred to me. They went LSU. In the second round. They added some offensive line help in the fourth as well as up front. They really drafted. They drafted well. It feels like for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they don't always do that, but it feels like this year they played things very well. Trading back in the first round and still getting the guy who was probably who they wanted all along, and then adding some good pieces at positions of need along the way. So I like what the Jaguars did. And now here's an interesting one I have on my list is the Cardinals. And the reason I say it's interesting is because I'm really only putting them on the list because everybody on TV and the radio has talked about them as having such a great draft. Me personally, I think they did well, but I don't think they did quite as well as like the Vikings. And again, I know that maybe I'm focusing too much on the first round, uh, but I was not as big of a fan of Darius Robinson, the pass rusher, defensive lineman out of Missouri, as some other people were. But if you liked him, then I could totally see why you loved what the Cardinals did in the first round. And I love them taking Marvin Harrison Jr. It's what I had them doing in my mock draft. It's what I said they needed to do all along. Don't fall in love with any offers, unless you get just something that's too great to pass up on, like 3 first round picks and more. Just go ahead and take the surefire can't miss star wide receiver and be happy about that. And that's what they did here. They didn't overthink it. They didn't outsmart themselves, and they didn't trade back for, what who knows what was offered, but Harrison Jr. is an outstanding prospect, and the number one prospect in the draft, in my opinion. And again, if you like Darius Robinson, then they had a great first round, but they also added Trey Benson in the third round. That I'm just not always a fan of drafting running backs in the first 3 rounds, but if there's one you really like, then we did it last year with Tajay Spears, and that worked out well. Obviously, we drafted Derrick Henry in the second round several years ago, and we see how that worked out. So maybe I'm wrong, but just all the time we see these guys who are undrafted or who were, Isaiah Pacheco's a 7th round pick. We just see these guys who were late round picks or undrafted at that position end up doing great, and it just seems like it's not worth it to spend anything higher than a 4th round pick on a running back, in my opinion. And that also goes for the Bijan Robinsons and whatever else is of the world. I do not like the idea of spending a 1st round pick, especially on a running back. Now, there are exceptions. I mean, if there's somebody who's just like like if a Bijan Robinson's available in the 2nd round, okay, then I'd be good with it. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. So I like what the Cardinals did. I mean, who else did they do? They got Christian Jones, who's a tackle out of Texas in the later rounds in the fifth. But they just added some talent. I didn't see it as being quite as outstanding of a draft as it seemed like everybody else did. But hey, it's definitely a good one. I also have the Ravens on my list, honestly, just because they do it every year. They are consistently the best drafting team in football, and that includes the Packers and anyone else. The Ravens just go, Ozzie Newsome. I don't know if I think he's still involved with some of this, even though he's, not the GM anymore. But he has just been someone who has been like my top GM when it comes to talent evaluation and drafting, uh, as long as I can remember, really. Ozzie Newsome is just brilliant, and I was so happy to hear that he was retiring because I thought it finally means that the Ravens are going to fall off a little bit, but they still have not. And now here's an interesting thing that I noted about the Ravens. Um, and this is something that it hadn't occurred to me until this year, but it feels like maybe one of the reasons the Ravens draft so well is because it feels like they might actually listen to the media a little bit. Because if you look at their draft, they often end up taking guys that are similar to, where Mel Kiper and Todd McShay and Daniel Jeremiah and the other experts had these guys. Whereas you see so many other teams, or every other team really, just going by what's on our draft board, what our scouts say, that's what we're going to listen to. I think the Ravens maybe do sort of take in information from outside sources, maybe more than other teams. And maybe that's why they draft so well, is maybe they're not just so focused on, we know what's best. Our people are going to know what's best no matter what. I think maybe the Ravens are open to watching some draft coverage on TV or listening to Mel Kiper a little bit. Because it seems like every year their drafts end up kind of coinciding with a lot of what these experts say, more than any other team. I mean, if you look, who did the Ravens end up? They took Nate Wiggins late in the first round. Now, that was maybe a little higher than, well, actually, no. I mean, that was about right. But I think it was maybe a little high because, like, McKinstry was still on the board at that point. I know Mel Kiper like Cooper. Evidently, his name's DeJean. I've been calling him DeJean all along because that's what it looks like. But evidently, it's actually Cooper DeJean. Um, he had him rated higher, although I disagree with that. But Nate Wiggins, it was close. And having him there at 30, that was about where he was projected to go. That offensive tackle they got at the end of the second round was about where he was projected to go. You look at Adisa Isaac, they got him in the third round. He was looked at as someone who would have gone, who was expected to go earlier than that, I think. Tez Walker, they got him. He was another guy that was sitting on, Kuiper's best available there for a while before they picked him. TJ Tampa, exact same thing. He had been sitting there on Mel Kiper's best available for a while until the Ravens took him. And it's just pick after pick. It's like, that's kind of what the experts were thinking as well. And you don't see that from any other team, I don't think, as consistently. You always see these teams, making these picks that are maybe a little surprising, maybe don't, fit according to what the experts say, and maybe this guy was drafted a little too high, or maybe they passed on a guy they should have taken. But the Ravens, they just don't do that. It's like they just use common ass sense. How about that? It really is. It's like they maybe are willing to, and I don't know. I'm just guessing. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe they do listen to the media more than others. Maybe they're not so focused and so arrogant to think that their people are always going to know best, because their drafts often line up pretty well with what the experts project. And they end up drafting the guys that are projected to be good players by the media. So anyway, that was just an interesting thought by the Ravens. Now, they still maybe didn't address every need, and, could have maybe, I don't know. The Ravens just every year are either between a good draft and knocking it absolutely out of the park. And it's frustrating for all the rest of us to see, especially given, that the years, the decades long rivalry between the Titans and the Ravens, going back to the old AFC Central, I think it was days. Even though we're not in the same division anymore, that's still a little rivalry there. But anyway, speaking of current and real rivalries, I also think the Texans did well. Um, Now, I've heard mixed opinions on them. Some people didn't like their draft as much. In fact, I was just while I was in the bathroom, actually, after I ate breakfast, reading a CBS Sports draft team grades, and I think he gave them like a C or something. He wasn't too thrilled with. I like what they did. Kamari Lassiter is a good player. It might have been a little early for him, but he's a good player. Um, they took the other tackle from Notre Dame, which I'm not going to say I know much about him, but Notre Dame, usually turns out pretty good offensive linemen. Kalen Bullock is another one who is a very good player, and several years ago when safeties were still valued, he probably could have been a late first, early second round pick. Cade Stover is a guy I really, really like, and I really, really wanted the Titans to take. They got him in the fourth round. I could be wrong about him, but he just seems like a Jason Witten type. Like a little bit of an old school throwback tight end, a guy who can block and catch. He's not huge, he's not overly athletic, but he's athletic enough. He's got great hands. He's reliable. He's smart. He's a leader. I just really liked him as a prospect and really wanted the Titans to grab him, but they didn't. They also got that running back out of Louisville in the sixth round, I think it was. So I really like what the Texans did. Even without having a first round pick, it feels like they had a good draft. Um, how how many others? Let me pull over here for a second. What else did I have? Okay, so we've got one, two, three, four others to talk about, and then we're gonna hopefully quickly discuss the thing that's been on leading every show since the first round, since Thursday, and that's the Falcons. But let's quickly go through these other teams. I like what the Saints did, taking Fuaga at 14. Um, he's just a versatile player. He might end up being a guard, but he could play right tackle, I think, and they need help up front. They got McKinstry in the second round, a guy who I feel like is going to be a star and really was kind of underrated in this draft. And then they didn't have a pick till the fifth round again, but then they grabbed Spencer Rattler. I don't think he's going to be that good, but he could be a good sort of backup plan or, sort of insurance policy if Derek Carr goes down, it might be he might be okay. I mean, God knows he's got all the tools and was a huge big time recruit and has matured since his time at Oklahoma. So we'll see. But I like Fuaga, I like McKinstry, and I like them taking a chance on Rattler there in the fifth round. Um, then this one I had to. Excuse me, sorry, I gotta get a sip of my coffee here too. Um, I had to throw this team in because it feels like they are often a laughing stock when it comes to off-season things and don't draft well usually. Excuse me, I'm sorry, guys. Maybe I need a cough drop. But I have to throw the New York Jets on here because it feels like they really, really did a great job in this draft, especially by the bar that at least I have set for them, which is very low when it comes to drafting. They by that standard, it feels like they knocked this one out of the park. I mean, you guys know how I feel about Fashion. I would have taken him there at 7 if I was the GM of the Titans. Um, they actually traded back one spot with the Vikings, so they acquired a little bit more draft capital there, and which really cost them absolutely nothing. It's not like they were going to take McCarthy, so they got basically some free draft capital there and got the guy they wanted anyway in Fashanu, and that was the smart pick. It was not, the let's appease Aaron Rodgers pick. It was not let's just take whatever receiver's still there or take Brock Bowers because we're, trying to go all in with Aaron. Really, this is a whole other topic, but I don't think the Aaron Rodgers thing is going to work in New York. Yeah, we'll discuss that another day. But they did the right thing here, taking a guy who could end up being the best offensive lineman in the draft at 11th overall, has the highest ceiling of anybody, has the versatility to come in and start week one at guard. And then as soon as Tyron Smith inevitably gets hurt, you kick him out to tackle. I think it was the perfect pick. It was what I had them doing too, I think, in my mock draft. It was a great pick. And then they grabbed the receiver at the beginning of the third round, a good one. Who, I didn't see much of him, but all the accounts and everything I'd seen and heard and read is Malachi Corley could be a very good receiver. They got a good running back to add into the stable, in the kid out of Wisconsin. Oh, and another thing that I loved, absolute, this was my favorite pick, was Jordan Travis. My favorite pick for the Jets. I love that they took a chance on him in the fifth round. I don't know why he was available in the fifth round. I mean, I get that he's coming off of the big injury. He's not going to be ready to play as a rookie. If he had been healthy, he was going to be at worst, an early second round pick. I don't know if he had been healthy. I don't know that you take Michael Penix. You definitely don't take Bo Nix. I don't even know if you take J.J. McCarthy over a healthy Jordan Travis. And they got him in the fifth round. I mean, come on. That's their heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers right there. I think he is good enough to be a good starting quarterback in the NFL. I mean, I've seen quite a bit of him play. That dude is I think he's as good as Jaden Daniels. I really do. Like, Jordan Travis, until he got hurt, was running away with the Heisman that Jaden Daniels ended up winning. So, yeah, the fact that they were able to snag, I mean, just going down the list, you get the most upside offensive lineman, could be the best offensive lineman in the draft at 11th. You get a really good receiver at the beginning of the third round. You get a good running back in the fourth round, which is not, in my opinion, that's about when you should start looking at running backs if you need one. And then they get the guy who could end up being their quarterback of the future in the fifth round. And maybe I'm just a Jordan Travis fan. Maybe I don't know. I honestly really do think he should have gone a lot sooner than that. But you even look at all the draft experts, the Mel Kipers and everybody had him rated way, way down. And it, couldn't have just been the injury. I mean, I don't know if they were even factoring that into their evaluations. I don't know. I don't get it. I know he's not, prototypical size, but it's not like he's undersized. But he's got everything you could want. He's got the arm. He's got the athleticism. I don't get it. I don't know why Jordan Travis was not evaluated as being, one of these top quarterbacks, but just going to be somebody you're going to have to wait on and, have at least a year behind another quarterback while he gets better. Or, heals over the injury. So I don't know, but that could end up being the steal of the draft, in my opinion. And then another one that I liked was I had the Saints, Jets, the Eagles. I liked what the Eagles did, even though I don't like them. You got to like them, snagging Quinyon Mitchell without having to trade up, because a lot of people were thinking they were going to have to trade up to get one of these guys, a Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell. They stayed put and had their pick of any of the corners on the board. Then they get the guy that Mel Kiper loved early in the second round, in Cooper DeJean. They got a guy who's a very interesting prospect as an edge rusher in the third round. They got Will Shipley, who could end up being, I don't know, Burkhead type player maybe, but he's a versatile guy. He's, a poor man's Christian McCaffrey kind of. Anaya Smith is another one that I thought could end up being a steal, and I was kind of hoping the Titans might have a chance to snag him. He went in the fifth round. He's a guy who started his career at running back and then transitioned to wide receiver. He's an elite returner, and if he can get better at playing the position of receiver, he can be every bit as good as Xavier Legette, except faster, really. And, and he's a guy that you can do a lot with. You could put him in the backfield and he can be totally comfortable. You can put him out there and do jet sweeps, and they got him in the fifth round. They also got Jeremiah Trotter Jr., continuing the legacy there in the fifth round. Johnny Wilson is another guy they got late that I thought was going to go sooner. They got him in the sixth round. So I think the Eagles really, really had a great draft. And then finally, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I liked what they did in the first two rounds, you know, focusing on getting better up front, because that's been something that it feels like they've neglected over the last several years and has really, really hurt them. They spent their first two picks on interior offensive linemen, and they are going to try to get back to playing Steeler football. Then they got Roman Wilson in the third round, a guy who is also someone else that feels like could have gone earlier and can be, a good number two receiver in the league. Peyton Wilson's one of my favorite players in the draft. They snagged him in the third round. So yeah, I love what they did as well. So, again, just a quick recap of my favorite teams in the draft, what they did in the draft. The Vikings, I just feel like they knocked that first round out of the park. The Bears also did a good job in the first round, did what they needed to do, did what they were expected to do, and didn't outsmart themselves. The Jags, I like what they did. The Cardinals, everyone else loves what they did, so it feels like I got to say it too, I guess. But it didn't jump out to me as one of my favorites. But I did like what they did, and they were another team that it feels like didn't outsmart themselves, didn't overthink it. The Ravens, just you can always pencil them in as one of the teams having the best draft class. The Texans, Saints, Jets, Eagles, and Steelers. Honestly, I liked the Colts draft too, but I just could not bring myself to put every AFC South team on my list, knowing that I don't even know if I would have put us on the list if I wasn't a Titans fan. So, but they did have a good year. I would have taken Dallas Turner where they took Latu, but I've said all along, it's very close between those three, and you can't fault them if that's who they like the most. They had their pick of any defensive player they wanted, and yeah, that was a crazy long run on offensive players. 15 straight, I think it was, to start the draft. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to go over something really quickly, and we'll talk about the Falcons. What was the thinking there? Be right back. All right, hey friends, going to do a quick lightning round of the handful of topics that I have left, and then talk about the one big one that was left, because I'm almost out of time. First, James Pierce. How about him now being in most of the big boards that you look at and the way too early mock drafts you see? James Pierce is being viewed as the number one player in the country right now, as far as like pro potential guys. He is seen as being like Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett type level. Like, how awesome is that for a Vols pass rusher to be viewed as the number one player in the country, according to a lot of big boards right now? That's awesome. Also, speaking of the Vols, Joe Milton is going to get his opportunity in New England, which was an interesting choice because they had already taken Drake May third overall. But God knows Joe's got all the potential in the world. I don't think he's ever going to live up to it because it feels like he would have by now. He's had good coaching at Michigan and then at Tennessee, and he's just never been able to fully harness everything. But maybe somebody can get it out of him in the NFL. Also, it was really cool to see Jalen Wright going to Miami. Just another friggin' weapon. I felt like he should have gone earlier. Maybe that's some Tennessee bias, but they got a guy who's going to come in, and you put him with Achane and Mostert, who still somehow is being crazy effective at his age. But now Jalen Wright's in that mix, along with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's just, they love speed. They love explosive offensive weapons in Miami, and it's hard to blame them. And they got another one. So that was really cool. Kamal Hadden also got drafted. I can't remember where, but that was cool. Who else? Who else did we have? Gabe Judy Lawley, the Titans. I think we either drafted him late or signed him as a free agent. We might have signed him as a free agent. and there was one other one, defensive lineman. Who was it? Anyway, I can't remember. But anyway, the Vols, we didn't have anybody picked until like the third or fourth round, which sucks. But I really hope things work out well for the guys who did get drafted. Now, I'm gonna take a really quick break, actually, and then I'll be right back. All right, folks. So let's talk about the one thing that every single sports show is leading off with and spending a lot of time on ever since Thursday, and that's the Atlanta Falcons taking Michael Penix at 8th overall. There's really not much I can say about it, honestly, that hasn't already been said. It was definitely a head scratcher. It's one of these picks that, feels like in the moment, with everybody being as kind of short-sighted as we are, during draft time, that it was a total waste. Excuse me, but it's one that we could look back at 2 years from now and think, man, what a great job they did. Just, this could be Jordan Love, or it could be just an absolute waste. But there's a difference there, and I've said this all along, and I'm sure you've heard it on other shows as well. There's a difference between what the Packers did with taking Jordan Love and what is this idiot doing? The difference is that Kirk Cousins hasn't even played a snap for them yet. It was one thing for the Packers to spend I think it was like mid-teens pick on a guy they felt was raw and they could develop into a quarterback of the future when Aaron Rodgers has been there for, 12 years or whatever at that point. It's another thing to have just given a guy this massive contract, the free agent contract in the offseason. He hasn't even played a down for your team yet, and now you're drafting his replacement at 8 overall. Yeah. But, the results could end up being as good as what's happened with Jordan Love, but it is a very different situation. And it really does feel like, and I've heard people kind of going both ways on, does Kirk Cousins have uh, justification to be upset about it? And I think he kind of does. I mean, it feels like, he had plenty of suitors. He could be out there right now, throwing balls to Devontae Adams, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, Jacoby Myers in Las Vegas. He could be in Denver with Sean Payton right now. He chose Atlanta because he clearly believed that, they had presented a good opportunity for him. Now, also, the financials were probably the best there, and God knows if there's anything that Kirk Cousins is Hall of Fame at, it is getting big contracts and getting paid. His agent deserves every accolade possible for that profession. But he had to have gone into this situation thinking, this is a team that everybody seems to think is just a good quarterback away from being a contender. I don't think that, but a lot of people do. This is a team with a new, head coach and kind of getting a fresh start there, but they have tons of talent at skill positions. They've got a decent offensive line. They've got a decent defense. And this is somewhere I can go and win. And they've got the 8th overall pick that they can go and add even more talent. And, we can go all in right now and maybe, make a run at a championship here in the next couple of years. That's got to be the thinking. But the 8th overall pick is a big part of that. And to spend it on a quarterback when it was puzzling. Now, it could end up working out. We don't know. But, I mean, obviously Dallas Turner was there. Byron Murphy was there. Latu was there. Roma Dunze was there. I mean, it was the 8th overall pick. You had tons of options there that would help your team, of guys who would come in this next year and help your team win immediately and for the future. But instead, you draft the quarterback that a lot of people, didn't even have Some people didn't even have him with a first round grade. Now, from what I hear, he was the second rated quarterback on the Falcons board. And that's kind of, I think, the opposite of that's the opposite end of the spectrum with what I was talking about with the Ravens. The Ravens, who it seems like are, kind of open, listen to maybe what other experts think and don't get so focused on just what their people think and are so arrogant about, we know best. That's kind of feels like what the Falcons did here. They were just convinced we see something in this guy that no one else does. And they took him. Another interesting, I heard a couple of interesting theories on this as well today. One is that maybe they went ahead and took him because they're afraid they're going to lose their first round pick next year because of the obvious tampering stuff that happened with Kirk Cousins. And they were thinking, if we want to get a quarterback, we need to go ahead and do it now while we've got an opportunity at this guy we really like because we might not have a first round pick next year. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that they were thinking of it like that, but it's possible. Another theory that I heard that really feels much more likely is that the people who run the team, Fontenot and the others, the decision makers on the team, were basically, they seem to be above all interested in preserving their own jobs. That's why they did not hire Bill Belichick, even though he was the best option of coaches on the board available to them, even though the owner seemed to like him and everything seemed on its way to being official. But the current executives and, brass shut it down and talked Arthur Blank out of it, although, there are other things to it. But it was mostly coming from the other guys there because they were afraid he was going to threaten their jobs. Knowing how he's always run things in the past where he's been, all the decisions are his. They didn't want to risk that. So they end up going with a much more vanilla, boring option in what's his name? Although he could end up being a good coach, he obviously spent a lot of time there. He was an interim coach after they fired Dan Quinn. And he's got experience. He's done a great job with the defense with the Rams. It's not like it's going to be a bad choice, but anyway, they clearly were interested in preserving their own jobs and avoiding Bill Belichick. And I think that might have been the same thing here. And this is not my idea. I heard Evan Cohen on ESPN radio say this morning. But he thinks that they were thinking, this way we will always have a quarterback. And so as long as we've got a decent quarterback, we are going to be at least mediocre and we can continue in our jobs. That could have been a big factor in this. It really could have. So, I don't know. It was strange. But another thing, and this is something that I'm sure you've heard other places too, but it's worth reiterating. If they knew they loved him so much, why do you even pay Kirk Cousins all that money? Because if they knew they loved him and they had him as the second rated quarterback on their draft, well, they had to know that no one else had him that high. So he was going to be available to them at 8. So why do you spend all that money on Kirk Cousins? It's not like you didn't know this. Your scouts are scouting these guys all year. Maybe the GMs and other decision makers don't start paying much attention to it until the off season. But the scouting departments, the ones who really are the guys, looking into this stuff and presenting this information and helping them make the decisions, they would have already established this. So you had to have already known you liked him so much before free agency. So why do that with Kirk? It just doesn't make sense. And the other angle, and this is something that I haven't heard anybody say outright on any TV or radio shows, and I'm kind of surprised because I heard Mike Tannenbaum talking about it this morning, talking about the Atlanta Michael Penix pick, and he's a guy who I've heard actually talking about this very issue a lot, but he didn't bring it up with this, and that is the value of having a quarterback on a rookie contract, the value, the importance of that cannot be overstated, because that frees up, what, $50 million, $40 to $60 million worth of cap space that you can spend on any number of positions, any number of other players. That's 3 other high quality players, or several other pretty good players. So you're able to spend all that money because you've got a quarterback on a rookie deal. Now you're wasting that, because you've got the quarterback on the rookie deal, but you've got another one who you are paying a huge quarterback contract to. So you could have spent all that money somewhere else. So it's just it seems like they're not headed, they don't know which direction they're headed in, because it seems like they were in win now mode when they paid this older veteran quarterback a shitload of money, a lot of guaranteed money to come in and win now. But then they draft this younger quarterback with the 8th overall pick. So it's just redundant. It's like, sorry, bear with me just one moment. Actually, I'm going to drive around for just one more second so I can finish this thought. But it just feels like it's kind of either way you look at it, it's a waste. You either wasted the 8th overall pick, or you wasted $45 million a year in cap space, because you can't play 2 quarterbacks at the same time. So, you're wasting this rookie contract, and you could have spent all that $45 million a year, or whatever it was. I guess it was about $45 million a year. You could have spent that on edge rushers. You could have spent that on the offensive line, more skill position help. You could have spent that any number of ways and added multiple veteran players to help you win right now. Or you could have taken Kirk Cousins and then spent that 8th overall pick on the best defensive player in the draft, or any other number of guys you want, to trade back and acquire more picks. It's just, I don't know, man. It did not make any sense. But there are lots of theories to it, and usually when there are lots of theories of why something happened, it's probably not a good pick. It's probably not a good decision when people are having to come up with creative theories to figure out why in the hell you did it. So anyway, I got to take a quick break. I'll be right back. Alrighty, friends, that's going to be it for me. I got to get to work. I hope everyone had a great weekend. I hope you have a great week and a great Monday today. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, Talking Sports at Work on YouTube. Follow me on all the Instagrams and the Twitters and whatever at HDW Pursley. Like and subscribe to the podcast, to the YouTube, and yeah, help me be successful at this crap. All right, love you, bye.